Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad you're here with us today. It's good to be here with the Boulder Public Library as part of One Book, One Boulder to bring you a piece of Motus Theater's strategic narrative work. Thank you so much to the Boulder Library Foundation for their generous support of this and many other programs at the Boulder Public Library. I'm Tanya Titus, Motus Theater's National Outreach and Education Director, as well as an undocumented monologist in our Undocu America series. Motus Theater's mission is to create original theater to facilitate dialogue on critical issues of our time. And although we are all joining from the comfort of our homes today, we want to honor that the city of Boulder stands on the lands of the Arapaho, Cheyenne, and the Ute. This evening, we will be sharing on Zoom for the first time 4 autobiographical monologues from Motus Theater's JustUs project that will help us more deeply understand the impact of the criminal justice system so we can reflect and take action. These monologues were created in a Motus monologue workshop in collaboration with Motus's artistic director, Kirsten Wilson. And tonight, in between monologues, we will have the pleasure of listening to the musical medicine of the a cappella gospel choir, Spirit of Grace, who regularly tour with Colorado's most famous experimental rap rock band, the Flowbots. You may have heard them singing the national anthem recently at a Nuggets game. They have chosen short musical responses to honor each monologuist that they hope will inspire the storyteller and keep us all moving forward to support true justice. While they're singing in between each monologue, we hope that each of you will add into the chat what most impacted you from the story you just heard. And after the performance, we will have a special education component with Colorado State House Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez, who will join us to discuss and answer questions about the Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act, a bill which she co-sponsored and is the first in the nation that challenges qualified immunity and includes provisions such as banning chokeholds, overhauling the use of force, and significantly expanding the use of body cameras. We are also delighted to have the criminal justice representative of the local NAACP, Darren O'Connor, who will speak briefly about how you can join in their efforts. And at the end of the formal presentation, you are welcome to stay on Zoom with us for Q&A with Representative Gonzales-Gutierrez, Darren O'Connor from the NAACP, and Juaquin Mobley, Justice Monologist, Project Advisor, Entrepreneur, and Vice President of Community Works, which is an organization that helps those individuals who were recently incarcerated and or are at risk of becoming incarcerated to get job training, realize their true potential, and manifest their limitless potential. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Brandon Wainright, who will share the first JustUs monologue.
Well, trying to live, I lost my life. At birth, I was named Brandon Marlowe Wainright. That is the name my mother used, as well as the teachers at school. On the street, my name is Doug. D to the UB, or you can call me Young Black King. But on a serious note, let me tell you that 90% of people from my hood are considered failures. And I'm supposed to act like I can't be part of that 10% because of the way you think of me and because my ways are often too ignorant. I have a young mother, young father, brothers and sisters at home, barely food in the fridge or water, depending on if it was on. I'm surrounded by old heads and youngins walking around with handguns, and they won't hesitate to let me know what they think of my honor roll ass if I can't fight. School is kind of a sanctuary, if you will, or safe haven. It's like, look, I can be myself. I can be a nerd. I can be a thespian. I can do sports. I can do whatever I want while I'm in school because I'm living my life. This is how I want to live. This is how I want to live. But outside of school, I put on a whole other mask. I fight, and I fight, and I fight. I am Doug, and me and my gang, we do what we do. Big time shoplifting, small time drug dealing. Like I said, in my hood, 90% of the people are considered failures, and they are the people whose approval I need in order to survive. And you might not like the guys I hang out with, but they are the only ones who have my back, and I have theirs. Oh yeah, I do. And this is not the life I want to live, but it is the life I have to live. Things become harder when I turned 16. I stood up for my brother against my father, and for that, I am out of the house. I'm no longer his mouth to feed. From 16 on, there isn't anyone giving me a roof, clothes, food. I have to go and do that with the help of my gang. And that's why I said I had to live. I had to find a way. And then I was losing my life because at a young age, trying to be an adult, you know, you can't really have a life. You got to kind of give that up. But still, I stayed a star student, honor roll, state champ, athlete, blah, blah, blah. Against all odds, I still kept my cards. I kept my cards, man. And by my senior year, it is clear I'm going to be part of that 10% that makes it. That makes it. I mean, women, money, cars. I'm headed for the NFL. I have a full ride sports scholarship. I'm choosing the offers. I'm even going to be prom king. Who would have thought, right? So with all this heading my way, did anyone ask me why on January 12th of my senior year, I shoplifted? Let's just say I robbed 6 video stores in one night. 6 in one night. Instead of working hard to prove what a terrible criminal I was, did anyone consider I might also have been a young man having a hard time and needing some help? Did anyone sit in a circle with me and say, Brandon Wainright, what were you thinking? 6 stores in one night? You must have known you was gonna get caught. For a few $1,000s, you threw away a $100,000 full ride college scholarship. You were going to be part of that 10%. Why? Why, Brandon? No, they didn't ask. They charged me with robbery. They kicked me out of school. They made an example of me. Nobody acknowledged that I had to be the best at being Brandon Wainright, star athlete, star student, to make the 10% and thrive. And that I had to be the best at being dubbed, to have shelter, food, and survive. They didn't acknowledge that. I was locked in a terrible split that put surviving and thriving at war with each other. They acted like Brandon, the high school vice president of the future business leaders of America, was alive, and that I had finally shown my true colors, Black. As if I was by nature essentially a criminal. Nobody in the justice system or the school system cared enough to even ask why I did what I did. Nobody. And well, yeah, it's a long story. It's a very long story. But let me just say, at that moment, at the moment I made that decision, I was exhausted. I was exhausted by the fight, and I didn't even care. You wanna know why I didn't care? Because that night I was hurting. I didn't feel any love. You know why I didn't feel love? Because I wasn't getting it from the parents who I thought had made me their son. They didn't come to my games. They didn't care I was on the honor roll, that I was going to college, that I had a scholarship. And why wasn't I getting that love? Because I was living on my own at 16, away from the only home I had known. And because my parents were young, they hadn't grown up with much love either. And they were busy fighting poverty, fighting racism, fighting their own ignorance, fighting to survive themselves. And tired of fighting with me and struggling with how to raise a young Black son in a place where the streets have so much power and the parent has so little. Or you can just knock it down to the fact that where I was raised, you're either born with it or you're born without it. And no matter what you apply that to, And I thought I'd rather be caught with it than without it. I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. I needed money to live, for food, for shelter, for clothes on my back. And maybe to graduate looking nice in that prom king suit I was gonna buy with some of that cash. Yeah, it's a long story that you slam into one righteous move with your gavel, and you would have to actually care about me to understand. So instead of any help and support dealing with the challenges I faced, I got a lifelong label as a criminal and more obstacles to overcome. I was already tired and the fight just got harder. But I'm not giving up. I have two beautiful daughters, London and Anina. I have a handsome 5-month-old baby boy named Nasir, which means helper or one who gives victory. So everything that I do from this point on is for my kids and for my family, because they would never go through what I went through, because I'm always gonna be here, whether physically or spiritually, I'm always gonna be here.
Brandon, we hear you, we believe you, and we're glad you're still here.
I've come through the fire, and I've been through the flood. I've been broken into pieces, seen lightning flashing from above. But through it all, I remember that He loved me and He cares, and He'll never put more on me than I can bear.
Good evening. I'm Astro Allison, and this is my story. The system doesn't make sense, and we don't understand it. And if you think about it, outside of a lens of racist justification that says it's normal for 1 out of 3 Black men to end up going to prison, then you won't understand it either. We work hard too often at low-paying jobs only to be chased and locked up like exotic beasts. And then we get told, you're useless, you're worthless. And the system actually does that to you. It is a system without empathy, in which they can judge you like they want to. They can enslave you like they want to, because you're never going to be free. Well, maybe some people, but not you, not me, not he who has been convicted, because now he is lower than his peers. Or maybe no conviction needed. It's just because you're Black. I am awake to the injustice, the racism, the lies, but I'm still trapped. They waste us. They use our talent for surviving outside of legal opportunities of economic gain for their entertainment. And I am not entertained. I am not entertained. I want out of the Coliseum, but I am trapped, like everyone with me here. And even though I've so far escaped the prison game, there's no escape when you come from poverty. Because I am my brother's keeper. If the jail keeper has my brother, then I too am caught like my cousin is caught. You see, my cousin is like my brother. We are all we have. We got arrested for some messed up trespass charge in this small town in Texas. I knew being in that small white town that it didn't matter that there was a good reason we were there. It just wasn't going to look good regardless. So I paid somebody to get me in front of the DA before the court date. And when I talked to the DA, he dropped the whole case. He got to meet me personally, got to be surprised by the eloquence of a black man. But he didn't get the chance to meet with my cousin because my cousin had a public defender. And it's crazy. If their job was really to protect, defend, serve, and give you what you deserve, then they would have said to my cousin, I see obviously there's a mismatch here. Let me knock this off. But they didn't say that. Even though we were on the same case and it was dismissed, he still went to jail. He still got parole. And that one event stopped his life for years. He wasn't able to get a job in the area, but he couldn't move because that was where his kid lived. And it instantly made him stuck. He didn't want to live with his parents, crash from house to house, but he has to suck it up, do what it takes just to make a buck, to feed his kid. He's stuck. And seeing his pain is like seeing my pain. Every time I saw him needing something from me, it's dang. Like now I need something too because he's hurting for cash. Now we're hurting for cash. He needs something, so we need something because I'm his brother. And it's not his fault. It's not like he doesn't want to work. He's smarter than a lot of people that are in college. And he can't even finish his degree because he's too far away from a school. And he doesn't have a computer and stuff like that. And it sucks because some people are just given that shit and they waste it. I see these, I see these white kids all around me getting their tuition paid for by their parents, getting their dorms paid for by their parents, getting food, money, cars, extravagant things. You know what I mean? Luxuries that my people wouldn't even dream about. And everywhere there's this moral lecture coming from the criminal and justice system, the school system, the media about knowing right from wrong. And I'm working my job and going to college hoping that will get me out of poverty. But really, what are my chances of making it out? Because statistically, Black men don't make it up the income ladder. For us, there's rarely any ladder, just a lot of unexpected slides into prison. So don't lecture me on doing it right. Don't you dare lecture me. I grew up watching my mom struggle after doing everything right. She is noble. She is fierce. A Black woman impregnated with me at 16, and she still managed to graduate from high school. And my grandmother, even though she too was a single parent, the product of foster care, she did the best she could for my mom, and my mom would wash clothes, work at a daycare. So there was a place for me while she drove 60 minutes every day to get to a school, a college where she could get a degree, an advanced degree that would make her an elementary school teacher. And when she moved back to her hometown with her expensive degree and wanted to work for the same elementary school that she had once attended, she was turned down for the teaching position because they said she was underqualified. They told her she could be a teacher's aide, an aide. You know, that hard work we lectured you on when you were a kid attending this elementary school, you know that education we told you you had to get in order to prove your worth? It's worthless to us. Get back to the field where you belong. Well, she didn't go back to the field. And she got out of the whole education field itself because the next school in town that she applied to told her the opposite, that she was overqualified. And maybe it's good she got out of the whole education field. There's no money in it. Here in Colorado, we spend $7,000 a year on each student's public education and $39,000 a year incarcerating each inmate. The whole game makes no sense. It makes no sense. Thank you.
Astro, we believe in you. Don't give up. I just can't give up now. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. Oh, I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me. Oh, I just can't give up now. I've come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. Oh, I don't believe he brought me this far. 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 I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Good evening. I'm Juaquin Mobley. I'm the Vice President of Community Works, also a local entrepreneur, also a proud father of 3, and a future husband to a beautiful young lady by the name of DC, who I'm dedicating this monologue to this beautiful evening. So without further ado, I want to thank you guys for being here, listening to me and my brother's plight, and hopefully these monologues can empower you to be a catalyst for change within these communities as we go through these trying times. So let's get to it. It's fall 2002, and I'm 18 years old. I'm full of strength and light. I tripped all the way from Washington Heights in Manhattan to Flushing, Queens, the last stop on the 7 train. Down to my last, I traveled to Home Depot to be interviewed for a job. Filled with hope, and I was cloaked in desperation. I walked in to meet my potential new employer. His name was Sheldon. We interviewed, and I killed it. I mean, I simply killed it. I'm sure Sheldon felt my hunger. I instantly detected his Caribbean accent and tried to find common ground, being that my father was from that part of the world, and I too was raised in that culture of hard work. He bought in on me working there. He told me how much I was going to love the job and that I would make good money, you know, all that good stuff you want to hear when you're about to start a new job. Sheldon then took my social security number and stepped behind his desk to run it through his system. At that time in my life, I would not allow myself to feel anything but confident as I typed in the 9 digits that ultimately would determine my possibilities. I insisted on the image of him returning to me with his hand held out, ready to shake, and that I would return to my abuela with the reassurance of a new job. I mean, where I was at in my life, I had to. I simply had to. See, earlier that morning, the stakes had been raised. I had been startled awake. The sound of bachata music, sobbing, police, sirens, and the soft conversation between between two individuals outside my building discussing the terms and condition of the pre-purchase of narcotics. But those sounds, that's not what woke me. See, those noises in my neighborhood had become my background music, theme music, and in a weird way, it helped me sleep better. I could usually drown out even the loudest of those sounds, but that morning had been different. Something was wrong. Something was off. See, there was no sweet, beautiful aroma of fried yuca, eggs, onions that my abuela makes for me and my abuelo every morning. Nor did I hear the sound of Telemundo coming underneath my bedroom door. When I opened that door to my room, still halfway asleep, I discovered that the sobbing sound that I had grown immune to was coming not from outside, but from my family living room. It was my abuela, who was sobbing. I ran to her side and knelt down in front of her. ¿Qué está pasando, abuela? She handed me 2 letters, one from my abuelo, stating that he would not receive his Social Security for another year, and another from public housing, informing my grandparents that because I was on probation for a felony drug conviction that happened when I was really a youth, I had to leave my home or my entire family would be evicted, left on the street. It's amazing. It's truly amazing, right? What a day brings and takes from us in our poverty-stricken communities. Just the night before, I had this feeling of stability, hope. After all, I had an actual interview for a job. Do you know how many applications an 18-year-old Black and Latin man has to fill out before they even get an interview? I made it up in my mind it was going to happen. My babies' mothers needed money for diapers and food, and I was going to have it. But now, looking at those letters and my abuela sobbing, the challenge was overwhelming. See, now I realize I just didn't need, enough money just to support my kids and, to start college. I now needed more. I needed enough for rent. I needed money for a security deposit, utilities, or I had to hold the possibility of being homeless again. And I had to figure out how to help my abuela pay her rent with no Social Security coming in. So once again, despite the vision that I had gathered for myself while incarcerated of getting a job and making it to college and staying out of the drug game, I was now having to consider going back into that lifestyle and possibly risking my freedom as well as my life and putting my family in harm's way. See, in the last year, I had already lost 2 friends. They were murdered over rivalry for selling territory. So trying to stay strong for my abuela, I kissed her and walked away. I kissed her and walked away to prepare for my interview at Home Depot in a new state of mind, one now heavy with threat and despair. But you can't let people see that and think that they will hire you. That's just not going to happen. So I masked it, and I began to mask it once I got in the shower. I showered, I dressed, and used every item of clothing I put on to build me up, hopefully to regain a little bit of strength and light so I could get on that train and feel it somehow just working out for me that day. So there I was, back sitting in Sheldon's office, practically praying, when his head finally reemerged from behind his computer. But I know something was off just by looking at his face. I can tell immediately that everything had changed. I was now dead to him, or at least untouchable. He wouldn't even look at me. He wouldn't even look at me in my eyes. The numbers had rolled out, and I was officially unhireable. I started talking real fast, trying to regain my ground. I told him I could be on probation or, something like that. I needed this job for my kids. I shared with him, what I was up against economically. He was unmoved. And his response to my sob story was just, sorry. But I was not going home without a job that day. Please, Sheldon, listen. I'm trustworthy. I'm an honorable man. I'm asking for a shot, an opportunity, and a chance. He just looked at me, impervious to what I was going through, and asked that I leave the premises. Well, I left more than the premises. I left not only the premises, but I left New York. My mom lived out in Colorado Springs, and I hoped to find work through her connections and stay out of the drug game. When I got to Colorado, I was surrounded by nothing but job offers in the community. However, none of them were legal. Did you know that according to the Brookings Institute, a black man without a criminal record is less likely to get called back for a job than a white man who checked the felony box? It's ridiculous. So I made that trek. I went to prison 2006, and I was given twice the time for the same crime as the two young white men who went up in front of the judge before me. That startled me awake, brought me back to reality, even more than the cries of my abuela. I was awake and angry with the injustice of it, and fierce with an intention of alchemy, to take all the steel, concrete, brutality, and disregard they gave me as DOC number 147388 and turn it into my own armor. I may have to fight to survive right now, but I will not be your entertainment. I am not your victim, and I will not let you make me into your victim. It's not an option. Every day, I gave myself a new challenge, a new task to help me keep my focus and my sanity. First, I built up my chest and biceps. Then I learned how to read and write in the language of my abuelos, Spanish. After that, I learned to read Arabic, the language of the black leaders in prison who were resisting with self-respect, self-love, dignity, and prayer. After I got my mind right, I re-enrolled in college and got several certifications despite the obstacles to getting my education in prison. And even with this arsenal of strengths, it was hard to stay out of prison. When I was finally released, they let me out with just $10 in my pocket. No fresh clothes, no hope. I almost didn't make it, despite my nearly 10 years of preparing for that very exact moment. But I did, and I'm here. And now I work to support other people coming out the prison system here at Community Works, guiding them as they take the skills they learned in illegal economies and transform themselves into entrepreneurs with legal opportunities, because this system wastes our brilliance. Thank you.
Juaquin, we hear you and we believe you.
Hold on, just a little while longer. Hold on, just a little while longer. Hold on, just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Fight on, just a little while longer. Fight on, just a little while longer. Fight on, just a little while longer. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Pray on, just a little while longer. Pray on, just a little while longer. Oh, pray on, just a little while longer. Oh, everything will be alright. Everything will be alright. Everything will be alright.
And now our final monologuist for the evening is Daniel Guillory.
Hello, my name is Daniel Guillory, and my autobiographical monologue is called Truth, Not Facts. The last time I went to jail, I had been in there for about 18 months while I was fighting my case. I called my mom. I said, yo, Mom, they dropped all the holes I can bond out. You guys want to bond me out? She said, well, let me talk to your sisters and see if we can come up with the money. And she talked to both of my older sisters, and they said, no, Ma, he's up to the same old thing. He's going to get out and go right back to the drugs. So we ain't in it. But my sweet mother said, well, I'm going to come and get you. She went and got a loan, and she came and bonded me out of jail. I was strong in the word, and I meant what I said. I was done with crack. After my mom bailed me out, I went to pick my car up that had been impounded while I was in jail. Right before they arrested me, they had searched my car. I mean, tore it up. They tore it up. I had a nice Cadillac, and they pulled out everything that could be pulled out. And they had found no dope in the car. I was finally arrested for what they had found in my house. I drove my car home. I was slowly putting the insides of it back together when I found the pipe right under the front seat with a big old rock right next to it, clear as day. And I'm thinking, are they trying to set me up? I mean, they had searched my car up and down, even looked in my spare tire, and the dope was right there under the front seat, just as clear as day. I picked up that rock and the pipe, and I put it in my pocket. I said to myself, nope, I'm not gonna do it. But I didn't throw the doggone thing away. I knew I should have just thrown it away, but I didn't. Later on that day, I broke it up and I hit that thing. Man, and boy, did Scotty beam me up. Soon as I got beamed up, here comes Mama. I mean, as soon as I took that hit, not 20 seconds later, she came home and saw me. I saw the tears in those big old brown eyes, and I said, oh, Mom, I bet if you'd have known this, you'd have left my ass in there. And she looked at me with tears in her eyes. She said, no, baby, I still would have come and got you. Sometimes when I tell the story, it still to this day brings up such vibrant emotions, and it makes me want to weep, just recalling those words. No, baby, I still would have come and got you. Oh my God, you could have kicked me or cussed me out. But that kind of blatant love makes you butt naked, raw, vulnerable. There's no defense. It makes you defenseless. Anything else I could have handled. Come on, bring it on. You're a liar, a failure, an addict. You're worthless, a criminal. Is that all you got? Yeah, come on, I can stand up to that. But love and grace will lay you out butt naked, no clothes on. Oh my God. That was what made me think differently. That was the pivotal point that led me to being drug-free today. That's the thing we got to convey to society. It's when a person least deserves love. That's when they need it the most. And that grace thing, that will give people the 360-degree turn that they need right there. The key is helping people remember their importance, understand their magnificence, and invest in helping them to reach their potential instead of punishing them. But the criminal justice system takes all of our shortcomings and our faults, and it magnifies them. That's all they look at. They take the smallest part of us and make it the biggest part of our existence. When all this good stuff is sitting right there just waiting, it's dormant. It's waiting to grow, but it's never been put in the right environment. And then instead, they send us down a dark tunnel to a place of violence at every intersection. A gladiator school where you learn how to place magazines around your belly in case someone tries to stick you. You learn always to step out of your pants when you sit on the toilet in case you're attacked, because in those kind of places, they get you when you're most vulnerable. And when you act out in that violence, they send you further down into a hole where there are no people, just an overflow of toilets and rats and isolation. If you drop an oak tree seed in a concrete world, it's still alive and vibrant, but it's not going to grow. It's just dormant. But you take that same seed and you drop it in a decent place where there's enough sun and earth and nutrients. You don't even have to plant it. Just put it somewhere where it can possibly grow, and that thing will take off on its own. The fact is, all of us in prison are human beings who committed crimes, but that's not our truth. We are not ontologically criminals. This is not our essence. And instead of helping us return to the full truth of who we are, the criminal justice system takes away our names, gives us DOC numbers, robs us of our dignity and freedom and happiness, and most of all, the potential to be the best selves that we could have been had someone tried to nurture us instead of neuter us. And how can it change as long as the justice system continues to lie about what it is doing to us? They give us a piece of paper that says, the court is sentencing the defendant to incarceration for 10 years of rehabilitation and is fitted towards that sentence. Rehabilitation, my ass. There is no rehabilitation in that place. When you send us to the Department of Corrections, you're essentially making us more incorrect. There's not a sliver of corrections in that place. Those of us telling our stories of the Justice Project are fairly new to this whole idea of restorative justice. But we know that telling the truth and taking responsibility for the harm that we have caused is a big part of it. And we have reflected as a group in our writing, processing on that harm. But we are also asking the criminal justice system itself to sit in this circle with us and hear the ways that we have been harmed, because it itself has been criminal in the name of justice. Thank you.
Daniel, we hear you, we believe you, and we love you. Love, a word that comes and goes, but few people really know what it means to really love somebody. Love, though the tears may fade away, I'm so glad your love will stay, 'cause I love you, and you show me, Jesus, what it really means to love. The nights that I cried, you love me. When I should have died, you love me. I'll never know why you love me. It's mystery to me. Now I'm glad to see Jesus. When all hope was gone, you love me. You gave me a song 'cause you love me. Now I can go on 'cause you love me. It's a mystery to me. Now I'm glad to see Jesus and what it really means.
Thank you so much to the JustUs monologist for such a powerful and first ever Zoom performance. And of course, for Spirit of Grace, for gracing us with your musical inspiration to keep moving towards justice. And the Boulder Public Library and the Library Foundation for sponsoring the One Book, One Boulder programming. If you haven't yet read the One Book, One Boulder book selection, so you want to talk about race by Ijeoma Oluo, read it today so you can catch her speaking with the library on November 5th. At this moment, a brief poll will show up on your Zoom screen about how you measure your experience of the JustUs monologues and Spirit of Grace. Please take a moment to submit your response. This is the end of the performance aspect of the event, but we are incredibly excited to have an important educational component. So many people have heard about Colorado's new Enhanced Law Enforcement Integrity Act because it got national coverage for being the first law that challenged qualified immunity. But many people don't really know much about what it is in that law or what qualified immunity is. So we are glad to have the co-sponsor of that bill, Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez, here to tell us a bit about it and answer our questions. In addition, we will hear from Darren O'Connor, the criminal justice representative of the local NAACP, talk about what you can do locally. And those of you with questions can stay with us for a short Q&A with Darren O'Connor, Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez, and Juaquin Mobley, Motus monologist and VP of Community Works, who has been supporting formerly incarcerated people with meaningful employment opportunities. And now, Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez.
Thank you so much. And I am really honored to be a part of this. I have had the opportunity to read stories alongside folks that you've heard today. And Joaquin, it's good to see you again. And so I'm really glad that you all invited me. My name is Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez, and I represent House District 4, which is located in North and West Denver. And I have worked in the space of child welfare and juvenile justice actually for the last 17 years. And so having this opportunity to work on this monumental piece of legislation that impacts the very families and kids that I have worked with for so long just means the world. And, it couldn't have been done without Representative Leslie Herod, who really led the charge. And in the Senate, we had our Senate President, Leroy Garcia, and Senator Rhonda Fields. And this was a bill that was brought forward and passed by legislators of color. And I want to speak on that fact for a brief moment, in that this is not something that typically we would have been able to do because usually we do need, our allies, and usually we do need, our white legislators to help us to, help our other members to see why this kind of legislation is extremely important. But we were at a point in time that we were actually able to do this with the Latino and the Black caucus joining forces to make this happen. And so I do have to give the shout outs to those folks. And of course, the ACLU, who was instrumental in a lot of the policy piece of it. So, I'm also a mom. I have 3 little ones. And I also come from a family of activists. My grandfather is the late Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, who led the Chicano movement in Denver. And he did a lot of work around addressing police brutality that was happening against Black and Chicanos in the 1960s and 70s. And so he stood on those very west steps of the Capitol, protesting the brutalities that were happening in that time, and to be able to stand on those same steps that my grandfather stood and say that we have made it's not completely the full thing, right? It is a piece, though. It is something that we were able to move forward that is just the beginning, right? And it took us that long to get there. And so I just wanted to give you a little bit of that brief history. So I'll kind of briefly go over what Senate Bill 217 does. The biggest thing that it does, and we are the first state to have done this, is it ends qualified immunity. And I'm sure Darren probably could talk more to this as well, because I am not an attorney. My background is in social work. But it's important to know that with qualified immunity, it essentially takes away that type of a defense for law enforcement officers to use, and that they could face further penalties in the justice system. It also requires police officers that are they're not the ones perpetrating, like in the case of George Floyd, where there were other officers witnessing, there's a duty to intervene as well. It also outlaws chokeholds and use of deadly force when somebody is fleeing the police. That was huge for us in Colorado based upon previous events that have happened here. It also decertifies bad officers. I have to make sure I have my notes because I don't want to miss anything. Decertifies bad officers. We also put in provisions that protects protesters from non-lethal projectiles. And, we're seeing some of those things play out again. And so it allows people, I think, to, bring forward suits, to the police with regards to those things. It mandates body cameras, and it also makes police misconduct, their video publicly available. So those videos that are on the body cams can become publicly available. It also authorizes the Attorney General to bring lawsuits to force bad police departments to change their practices. So this is called the patterns and practices. So if it's found that, like, for instance, some of the things we're seeing playing out in Aurora, that people are seeing this pattern, it's saying, okay, is it just the officer, or is there something else going on in this entire department? And then it also creates a public database to prevent the rehiring of bad officers, which is another huge thing, because what was happening is that officers were, getting, having some ramifications in one particular jurisdiction, and then they would leave, whether it was resigning or being fired, and then they could go over to another jurisdiction and apply there. This actually puts them in the database so that no matter where they go, everybody knows why they left the previous jurisdiction. And so I'm happy to answer questions. And I like I said, I'm super excited to be here. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative Serena, particularly for helping us understand all of your hard work. And in a few minutes, we will have the opportunity to ask her questions. Right now, we will share some action suggestions that organizations working on reforming the criminal justice system recommend in the chat. And here to talk about some of those action suggestions and the work of the Boulder County NAACP is Darren O'Connor.
Hi, everyone, and I'm so grateful to be here and to get to see the monologues tonight. Before I talked about the NAACP, I just would like to share how hearing the monologues, there was a constant theme that was there for me of how love played so much of a part in these stories, whether it was the lack of love leading to Mr. Wainright having to do things that led to his incarceration and how he came out of it, and is now working so hard to provide love for his own family so they don't go through the same thing. And then, every story had love of mothers in there, and it really touched me. And the thought that came to my mind is that justice is what love looks like in public. I believe that's a famous Martin Luther King statement. And these stories tell us that there's no love in our justice system, and there is therefore no justice. And as an attorney, I'm quite aware that I'm involved in a system that is broken. So with that, though, I want to share some hope and ways to get involved. First of all, I shared in the chat, and I'll share at the beginning and end here, that NAACPBoulderCounty.org is our website, and we would love to have you join. And I'm just going to share a little bit about our branch here in Boulder County. So I'd be remiss if I didn't share that the mission of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate race-based discrimination. We formed our branch in Boulder County in 2017, and we now have over 200 members. The original NAACP formed in 1909 and has taken on issues of justice and equality as bedrock work, including the amazing work of Thurgood Marshall, which included a successful Supreme Court litigation in Brown v. Board of Education in 1954 that ended separate but equal laws that had been upheld since our nation's founding. And he, of course, went on to become our first Black Supreme Court justice. Locally, our Criminal Justice Committee within the NAACP, which I chair, actively engages with community members and leaders, students, city councils, the Boulder County DA's office, and law enforcement to guard against civil rights abuses and transgressions. Recently, we've pushed for and seen the removal of 2 officers from the city of Boulder who were involved in racist and excessive use of force cases. And when one of them moved on to employment with the Boulder County Sheriff, as we recently learned, we pushed for and again saw his removal. Though we led more than 600 people in protest after one of these officers' egregious behavior, most of the work we do is in our committees, and our strength comes from our membership, which is why I'm here tonight to invite you to become a member and join us in the continuing struggle to ensure equality in Boulder County. Again, you can join online at our website at naacpbouldercounty.org. And if anyone is unable to join because of the $30 fee, we do have sponsorships. And so please reach out to us if that is a challenge. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Darren. Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez and all the artists, the JustUs monologuist, Spirit of Grace, Motus Artistic Director Kirsten Wilson, and a big thank you to the Boulder Public Library and the Library Foundation. So I know some of you might be getting off of Zoom, so before you do so, please take a moment to fill out a survey about this event. And for those of you who are staying with us to ask questions of JustUs monologist Juaquin Mobley, Representative Serena Gonzales-Gutierrez, and Darren O'Connor, please go ahead and submit them into the Q&A feature or into the chat. I will read out the questions for our speakers. Any of you can answer the questions posed. And if something is directed towards a specific person, I will let you know. And I think the first question is around the bill. It says, it's nothing short of revolutionary. So the question is, how hard was it to get it passed? Is it getting any traction with other states and nationally? And how can we help?
Yeah, so it was really interesting, at the onset of the murder of George Floyd, all the protests started happening, and they were happening right outside the Capitol as we had just returned due to COVID. We were, on this adjournment, and Representative Herod, was participating in, she was there at one of the protests that first day, and there were shots fired into the crowd. And I'm not going to tell her story because it is her story to tell, but that was, I think, kind of the impetus to where we ended up, right? And Senator Leroy Garcia, his truck got completely smashed up, it was totaled that same day. And when he was being interviewed by the press, they said, "Oh, what do you want to do about this?" And he said, "We need to hold law enforcement accountable. I'm not mad that this happened to my car. This is a material thing. We're talking about people's lives, and that's what matters." And so that's just kind of some of the background story there. And then as far as getting the bill through, it was a lot of work. Fortunately, we didn't have any strong opposition from law enforcement, the representatives from law enforcement. but we included them in every step of the way, in every conversation, going line by line through the bill. And all of the things in this bill are actually nothing new, right? Those who came before us, our ancestors, they've been working on these very policies. Former State Representative Wilma Webb was trying to ban chokeholds back in the 70s or 80s. And so these weren't new ideas. And we were able to gather, so there's the sponsorship of a bill and co-prime where you're both leading. And then there's people who can sign on as co-sponsors and sign on to the bill. And it's not typical that a lot of people sign on before a bill is introduced, but we actually got in both the House and the Senate, every single Democrat to sign on to the bill. And so they were entrusting Representative Herod and Senator Garcia and Fields, they were entrusting us that we were going to bring something forward that had a lot of work done on it. And that's exactly what we delivered. And we were actually able to pass the bill with, I think there were 2 in the Senate that didn't vote for it. So that meant most of the Republicans supported this. And in the House, out of 65 members, 15 people voted no, and those were Republicans. So there were almost half of the Republicans that did also support the bill. And so it was a bipartisan bill and just had outpouring support. And so it was very shocking because we actually, through our negotiations, we never gave anything up that was in the original bill. And so that was something that just, meant so much. And I'm sorry if I forgot the other part of the question, but it was about how we got it passed. And then there was one other part.
Yeah, if it's gaining any traction nationally.
Yeah, so Representative Herod and I have been meeting with other legislators in other states because they are also interested in the same process. Like, what did we do? How do we craft it? And, what were the pitfalls? Now, we know this is not the end all be all. We know there's more work to be done. And, we're having meetings to try to determine that. But we also know that anytime you pass a bill, it's also not always the perfect bill, right? There's sometimes things that we learn as it's being implemented, things that maybe need to be fixed a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The next question is for anyone really. It says, how do you suggest community members push restorative justice practices to city law enforcement who perhaps continues to show pushback to this idea?
I can take that just briefly and then open it up to others. But I know that in the city of Boulder and then through the sheriff's office, that restorative justice practices are available and are pursued, but it's limited to, for example, nonviolent crimes. And it so much is a way of bringing love into the justice process and bringing both the victim and the perpetrator together to heal that harm. So I think the community continuing to push for an expansion of the use of restorative justice is the direction we need to go. The pieces are already in place, and our DA, for example, in the 20th Judicial District here has expanded it, but it can always be used further. I know from my own practice that there are people that I'm representing who would benefit from that, and that it would be the right answer, but because of the charge, it can't be used.
And if I could just jump in on the end of that, I think what we need to do collectively as a community, just make that part of the fabric, the moral fabric. And that kind of gives it that grace, right? So that's what we need to do, is definitely start pushing that and sharing those practices, not only with the justice system, but within our households and in our school systems as well. So as my mother would say, it starts at home first. And I think we can attack it both ways, both going to the justice system as well as practicing it within our households and the community.
Thank you. The next question is, Oh, there was a question in there about, I think regarding the bill again, did you have to deal with the police union? And I think you might have mentioned, Representative Serena, that you didn't get a lot of pushback, but I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, we did. That's exactly who we worked with, amongst other stakeholders, of course. But the police union, they were pretty active, as well as the sheriffs. And, you know, they worked with us, right? Like those are the folks that we sat down with, their representation to go over parts of the bill that, you know, they maybe didn't like. And, you know, there was a lot we didn't change, but yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. And there's a question that asks, you know, what do we do when cops give us tickets using their authority to lie? And if I may even broaden that, right, like what are the mechanisms left up to the community if we see something that is unjust and we want to, you know, provide some accountability?
Darren, did you want to take that?
Sure. If we're talking about someone experiencing, for example, an unlawful arrest, you know, for trumped up charges, there's a couple things. I mean, we all have well, I'd like to think many of us have cell phones, right? So we can record what's going on. And now, thanks to this bill, I think it's in 2022 that everyone will be required to have body camera, and you know, that's sort of the number one thing to take care of what the person asked here. If it's an unlawful arrest, basically, that is a huge deterrent to that even happening. So it's a really a brilliant accomplishment to require all officers to have it. But I would say too, just as community members, and I know because I've done it for years, that stopping and monitoring the police when they're interrogating someone or stopping them, that can be a very frightening thing to do. But I've done it for a number of years, and I'll never know how many people had a different outcome because I was filming, and those people being filmed didn't always know what I was doing, and might be upset in the moment, and I could talk to them afterwards and say, you know, this was for your safety, or I would yell to them that I'm here to monitor to make sure that you're treated with dignity while this is going on. And since I have the floor for a second, it's just unbelievable to me that this bill passed. I didn't even know it was coming, Representative Gonzales-Gutierrez, and when I read it, I just thought there's no way I could have never seen this passing, and then to see it do so overwhelmingly. I mean, first, it's a tribute to the work that you all did, but it's also a tribute to all the people who took the streets and demanded that we have this kind of change. So that's the other place to address these things, is to realize that we're powerful together.
Thank you. There's a question for Juaquin. What would you like to come out of the Motus Justice Project?
Thank you. What I would like to come out of this project is just, again, I know it might be a far reach, but accountability, right? So I know that's what 217 is pushing, accountability. And so just getting people to, you know, challenge, you know, certain laws alone and hold people accountable, you know, for their actions or for their implementation of those laws, right? So with 217, that's exactly what it's doing. And I would hope that the stories that we shared with you all today would kind of be the impetus to pushing that accountability.
Thank you. And there's a handful more questions here. The next one says, can anyone speak about the movements to either defund or reform the police? What would you recommend? It seems that this bill seems like a great first step.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Joaquin.
Oh, ladies first. Ladies first.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've heard a lot about that, right? Like, what does defund the police mean? And well, first, police departments are funded on a local level, and there is some action, I think, at the state level that potentially could be taken, but a lot of it is your local governments and how they are funding their police departments. And we're seeing some of that play out right now in Denver as they're going through their city budget. And I think what I've heard a lot, and being in a line of social work, is everybody's like, well, we need social workers, right? We don't need cops, we need social workers. I find that very interesting because having been a social worker, we get a bad rep too, right? They're like, oh, you steal babies and you do this and that. So I can't say that that's like the perfect solution, right? That we just need social workers. I think it's about reallocating the funding, right? If we're going to move dollars from police departments and tell the police officers, look, your job is to enforce the law. That's your job. Not to respond to the homeless, not to respond to folks that are having a mental health crisis. Leave those to the professionals in which that is their expertise, right? So mental health professionals, when it comes to substance use issues, there are people that have a background that is more qualified and has training to deal with those kinds of situations. Of course, homelessness, right? That's not a law enforcement issue either. And so that's kind of where I see things going, and at least what I'm hearing out there as far as this reallocation of the funding.
Absolutely. And just to echo what was said previously, the definitely reallocation of funds is very important and integral into the whole defunding of the police. It's not necessarily saying, shut the police down. I don't think anybody's calling for that. But they're just saying with some of those funds that we can put it back into the community, make the community sustainable, and give them a chance to empower themselves. Currently, I'm working on a state planning team dealing with public welfare, where we're trying to figure out a way to start reallocating a lot of those funds, if given the opportunity. And what would that look like, and what metrics would be involved with that? And what we've been deciding on is really giving the community partners, people that are already doing the work currently in the communities, those funds, and just help them or assist them in doing more of that great work, right? And also getting more the mental wellness, as opposed to mental health, mental wellness involved in these communities, underserved communities. And that's what we're thinking it looks like, but it's definitely open for discussion and definitely needs to be spoken about.
Thank you. Thank you both. Darren, did you want to add anything, or should I just jump into the next question?
Just go on. Thank you.
Thanks. The next one is kind of sort of a visionary question, right? It says, can anyone share some of their vision for an ideal public safety system? I think people can't imagine something different than what we have now.
If I can jump in, I'm actually working on something right now. We got something what we call in the kitchen brewing right now. And what that looks like to a lot of the community members I work with is actually giving them the opportunity to allow or to decide or have some kind of influence on who comes in their community to police. So with that, the individuals that come into those communities to police, there'd be certain requirements. They would have to show up to community events. They'd have to have some kind of presence in the community. They need to show up showing that they're people as well, and that they have that same presence as, a principal or a, respectable people, as opposed to typically when we see the police in the communities I'm from, we only see them when something bad is going on, right? So that negative association is there. if they showed up to football games, baseball games, basketball games, just in plain clothes, just supporting the community, I guarantee you that that influence that they could potentially have would be very impactful and powerful. And on top of that, we want to make it to where they're educating our children about the law, right? So a lot of our kids don't know the law, and they don't know what's at risk on the other side if they break the law. But if they're part of that educational piece of it, it definitely, I think, will have some very powerful and positive outcomes.
Thank you, Joaquin. Do Representative Serena or Darren have anything to add?
Yeah, you know, in terms of an ideal, I don't want to take time talking about what the ideal police force might look like. Certainly there are improvements that can be made. But I think that addressing each person's individual reason for committing a crime is more the ideal. Having these, you know, the restorative justice process partially is an attempt to deal with that, and simply recognizing that people, you know, largely Black and poor communities commit crimes because of the lack of resources. This figure that we heard earlier tonight, that we spend $7,000 per student per year and $39,000 per incarcerated prisoner. I mean, just talk that shows, you know, very in stark relief, puts in stark relief where we need to change the system. If we're investing in putting people away and paying police to be part of that process, and paying judges and paying lawyers and all of us in this system, you know, not that very many of us in the legal system make tons of money, but it is well funded to put people away, right? And if we put that money into education, into giving people food if they need it, giving people a place to live if they're at risk of becoming homeless, which is such a huge issue right now. If we simply, you know, put our priorities and our funding into helping people and recognizing the reasons for criminality, you know, of course there are people who will still commit crimes. There are mental health issues and such, but we would overcome a huge majority of the kind of crimes that we see.
Thank you. The next question is, what are some unifying points that we can highlight, especially in these polarizing times? Do you have any messages of hope to sustain us in the slow process of effecting actionable change in our communities?
I can think of one right now that's just really important, and that is using your voice and voting. You know, any of these policies, like, you know, you think about, you know, what we did with Senate Bill 217, or any policies that we bring forward at the Capitol, or that your Congress, your senators bring on at the US level, what our president does. That's, you know, the hope that I have, is that we can influence that change by using our voice and voting. And in Colorado, we have a large ballot and a lot of ballot measures, and many that are meant to be regressive and really hurt, you know, communities of color and low-income communities. And so that's what my ask is of people, and that's where I see kind of some light a little bit at the end of the tunnel, because if we don't elect people that are willing to champion these kinds of things, then we're going to be stuck.
Thank you. The next question is specifically for Joaquin. Do you think everyone has the resilience and focus you possess? And what can we do to support people currently incarcerated?
Well, thank you for that. Yes, I think we all do have that resiliency. is just not, I guess, mined out right. And what I mean by that is that a lot of us don't know we have it. And as a result, we never really implement it because we don't know that we possess it. And I think that's something, being formerly incarcerated, something that they try to pull out of you, right? So that's something else that we need to address in there. Like, I used to hear people in there say a lot that I came to prison as a punishment, not for punishment, right? So with that, we need to definitely, deal with a lot more cognitive behavioral therapy, just some positive reinforcements in there, that'll push us more to doing more positive things once we make that transition into society. And for those who don't know, a lot of individuals that are incarcerated, I believe the number is high as like 93, 94% of individuals that are incarcerated will be getting out. So it can become a community issue if we don't start making these changes while they're incarcerated, in corrections, right? So I definitely think we all possess it. We just got to figure out a way to pull it out of each and every one of us, and that starts with one of us influencing and pushing each other to next heights.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are nearing the end of our time, so I would love to ask our guests here if you have any last words to everyone before they go off into their evening.
One of my favorite people always ends his broadcast with "Keep fighting." So I would leave us with that. The fact that we're still fighting some of these fights, 70 years almost after Brown v. Board of Education, we're still dealing with schools that are greatly divided. In Denver, they say it's worse than it was during Brown v. Board of Education. So let's keep fighting.
And I would like to leave the panelists as well as the listeners with an acronym, PEACE. The P stands for positive, the E stands for energy, the A stands for activates, the C stands for constant, and the E stands for elevation. So positive energy activates constant elevation.
I don't know that I can compete with that, Joaquin. That is amazing. I feel like I did mine earlier about urging people to vote because, I mean, that's where we're headed right now. And also, you can always reach out to your elected officials, and you can always be involved by coming down to testify at the Capitol, whether it's a bill you like and you want to support, or it's a bill that you don't like and you don't want it to pass. It's public testimony, and it's probably one of the most important things that we have in the legislature, because that's another place that you, again, can use your voice and your story and use that power to influence people.
Thank you. And I just want to say this was a wonderful event full of moving stories and amazing information. So thank you so much to our wonderful audience with your questions, and to our monologists and guests with your insights. I hope you'll take a moment to answer a brief poll question about the Q&A. And in addition, remember, you will actually get an email from Zoom with the survey link that was in the chat, so you can share more feedback with Motus and the Boulder Public Library. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening and that you attend future events with us. This concludes our program for today. Thank you.
We need a quarantine. This ancient war